You want to know who I am? Folks call me the Bone Man, ain't my real name, but it's the one that stuck. I've been wandering a long time, listening to music where most folks wouldn't think to listen in the hiss of old radio tubes. In the wind that whistles through broken guitar strings, hanging on a nail in a long, lonely highways where a trucker's radio picks up a station that ain't supposed to be there. Music travels farther than people reckon, further than rivers, further than roads, further than memory. Matter of fact, it travels farther than this whole earth. Back in 1977, the folks at NASA did something mighty strange. They built a little spacecraft and sent it drifting out into the dark between the stars. They called it Voyager. Now they weren't just sending a machine, they were sending a message. Bolted to the side of that spacecraft was a golden phonograph record along with schematic instructions on how to play it. Not for us, not for history books, for whoever or whatever might find it someday. They filled that record with the sounds of Earth, greetings in dozens of languages, the wind, the ocean, birds singing in the morning, and music, Bach, Beethoven, Chuck Berry. A whole little museum of human sound drifting out into a universe that might not have ears. The idea was simple. If somebody out there found that record, they'd know what we sounded like. What nobody ever stopped to think about was this. What if somebody did? Tonight on Requiem Radio, the golden reply.
The signal came from the desert. Not from the sky at first, not the way the stories usually told it. It started down in New Mexico at one of those radio observing stations where the dishes look like giant metal flowers turned toward the stars. Most nights, those telescopes listen to nothing. Just static. The universe is mostly quiet, not silent, mind you, but quiet in the way a graveyard is quiet. There's always a little whisper in the air. Cosmic radiation, distant quasars, the steady pulse of spinning stars. Astronomers spend their lives sifting through that noise, hoping one day to hear something different. Most never do. But one night a graduate student named Elena Vargas noticed something strange in the data, a pattern. At first it looked like interference, just a repeating spike in the signal every few seconds. But the rhythm was too clean, too precise. She ran the numbers again. The signal repeated every 3.6 seconds. Then she did what radio astronomers sometimes do when they're curious. She converted the signal into sound. At first it was just a clicking rhythm. Tick, 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 tick. Like a metronome tapping on the edge of silence. Then she slowed it down. And that's when she heard the melody. It was faint, thin as a wire, but unmistakable. A violin line bending upward through the static. Elena stared at the waveform for a long time before she said anything to anyone, because she knew that melody. Every musician on earth knew it. It was Bach. Now the thing about Bach is this: his music has structure, mathematical structure, patterns inside patterns like the gears of a clock, which made the signal even stranger because the signal wasn't just playing Bach. It was playing a recording. Not a performance, mind you, a recording, every little nuance of bow pressure and room echo preserved inside the radio noise. And that meant only one thing. Somewhere out there, something had access to a recording of Bach's music. The staff checked the telescope logs. The signal was coming from deep space, far beyond the solar system, far beyond Pluto. In other words, the direction of Voyager. The news spread quietly at first. Astronomers are careful people. They don't like making announcements until they're certain. But the more they studied the signal, the stranger it became. The Bach recording was only the first track. After it ended, another song began. A blues guitar, fast, bright. The kind of rhythm that makes your foot tap before you realize you're listening. Chuck Berry, Johnny B. Good. Someone at the lab laughed when they heard it. It seemed impossible. But everyone in that room knew where that recording came from. The golden record. The very same one bolted to the side of the Voyager spacecraft. At first, the scientists thought they were hearing an echo. Maybe Voyager had somehow transmitted the record itself. Maybe the signal was bouncing back from some distant object, but the math didn't work. The spacecraft didn't have that kind of transmitter. And the signal wasn't an echo. It was too clean, too deliberate. It played the music one track at a time, just like a record spinning on a turntable. And then something changed. Between the tracks there were pauses, long ones. At first the astronomers assumed the pauses were just empty signal. But when Elena ran the waveform through a spectrogram, she saw something moving in the silence. Tiny ripples in the sound, almost like breathing. Slow, inhale, exhale. The third time they replayed the transmission, the room got very quiet, because the next song wasn't on the golden record. It sounded like Bach, almost. The melody followed the same pattern, but the harmonies drifted somewhere strange. The notes bent in ways no human instrument could quite manage. It was like hearing a choir try to sing underwater. Someone in the back of the room whispered the word nobody wanted to say, imitation. They kept listening. The signal went on for nearly an hour. The first half was familiar music from the golden record, but the second half, that was new. Songs that sounded almost human, choirs that held notes too long, melodies that twisted into strange scales, and underneath every piece, that slow breathing rhythm. Weeks later, Elena made the discovery that ended the investigation. She wasn't looking at the melody. She was looking at the rhythm that breathed in pattern between the songs. She measured the spacing of the pulses, counted them, ran them through a medical database. Then she called the director into her office because the rhythm matched something very specific. The average breathing rate of a human adult. The final transmission arrived 3 days later. Just one track. No Bach, no blues, just a choir. Thin voices drifting through the static, trying to hold the chord, trying to stay together, trying very carefully to sound human.
You've been listening to Requiem Radio, where music bleeds into the supernatural, and that was the golden reply. Now I reckon the universe is a mighty big place, billions of stars, billions of worlds. Plenty of room for things we ain't never imagined. Maybe the golden record is still drifting out there, still carrying the sound of earth. A little blues guitar, a little Bach, a little piece of us floating through the dark. And maybe nobody's found it yet, but if they have, and if they're listening, I surely hope they ain't trying to sing along. Ain't gonna be no more tonight. Y'all rest easy and don't let the dark drive you home.